Harrington. Welcome to Heavy Lifts.
Thank you. Why? So, what's heavy lifts? Like, because you're a soccer player. Probably isn't a whole lot of heavy lifting going on in the soccer locker room there. Like, where are we? I've been thinking about this for like the last week or two. When you asked me, I was like, what does heavy lifts mean?
I love that you're asking me the question right away. Put me on the spot. So, heavy lifts was the genesis of heavy lifts. Was the thought that everybody, no matter what they're going through, whether it's sports or business or politics, whatever it may be, if you want to accomplish great things, there's a heavy lift. There's a component of red tape, of obstacles that you have to go through. So being able to kind of navigate that, telling those stories, and being able to bring to the surface the challenge that we all go through to, build a building, right, to win a championship, do things like that. That's the heavy lift, and everybody has to take a risk, right, a chance to do it, and just telling that story is why we're here and why we're talking to you.
I like it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing we got to get through is how you and I met. I want to go back in time, and if you remember,
Okay, you go ahead. You tell me, because I'm trying to piece it back together.
so if I remember correctly, there was a dude in downtown Salem who was badgering me for months about being on his late night talk show. And at one point in time, he said, "You know what, Nat? I've got Joey Harrington coming on this show as well, if that makes it any better." And I never heard of this guy.
That's right. It was the variety show.
Yes, exactly.
I completely forgot about that. Oh my God. I was thinking it was through Safeway. No, I met at Nella through Safeway. That's right. It was the variety show. What was that called?
I don't remember what the name of the show was, but I remember agreeing to go on. This is like, I think it was shortly after I had retired from professional soccer. And I was still kind of like finding my way and trying to navigate my next steps. And I was trying to just like to be open to anything when it came to promoting, right, myself and, being involved and connecting with people. And I was like, this would be fun. I've never met Joey. I'll go on this talk show. It was like 11 p.m. start or something crazy. I remember being super tired.
That's right.
And we I met you before the show. We kind of talked about how it was kind of weird. There weren't a lot of people in a lot of fans, but and it was kind of this like kind of grungy old bar in I think it was in Chinatown, in downtown Portland. And we're just sitting there like, what are we doing here? And we get on I don't know if you remember, we get on the show and we start getting interviewed and get questions, and we're kind of like looking at each other like, what are we doing here? How do we end up here?
Oh man.
Yeah.
That was forever ago.
Yeah, it seems like forever. I think it was like probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. But I was struck by how cool you were to hang out with. I felt like you had a lot more very, very insightful in terms of like you grew up in Oregon, right? This is like your home state. Like I come from Colorado, so I didn't know as much about the state as you did, and I was kind of intrigued about like your takes and how you obviously your professional sports journey took you kind of back home. Mine took me here, and we kind of intersected. And I was like, man, I would love to talk to Joey a little bit more about these things that are happening in Oregon and kind of get your takes on where we come from and where we're headed.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, professional sports, because like everybody thinks it's this incredible, glory-filled, luxury. Like all they see, all they see are the gladiators on Sunday, or the NBA guys and the private jets and all the, But what they don't see is that they take, for the most part, they take a kid from Colorado or Oregon, and one day just say, now you go here, and they drop you in Tampa or Detroit, or sometimes it's even like a tiny little small, if you're working through, I'm thinking some of like the USL teams, like working through the guys who are trying to make it. Like there's this really interesting world of professional sports that takes you to a lot of different places, right? I tell people I grew up in Portland, but I lived and worked in Detroit, Miami, Atlanta, New Orleans. I would train in Southern California, call games all through the Midwest. And so you get a chance to see so much of the country through that and meet a lot of different people. But yeah, like you said, I ended up back here and there's no place that I'd rather be.
I'm kind of curious, takeaways from your journey, right, in professional sports. Like, you know, mine, is different from yours. With our sport, I actually got to play, out of the country. So like a completely different
Yeah.
experience. Whereas, you're traveling to different, cities, right? Detroit is a different city from, Portland, clearly. And then, Miami,
Oh God.
right? Yeah. Right. And so like, I'm kind of curious, like, and there's some other things I really want to get into it with you about, but like, what was that experience like going from, being in Oregon, right, to all of a sudden you do get dropped in Detroit, and that's like your next step.
Um, look, my upbringing and my experience prior to professional sports was a blessing and a curse, right? I got to play college football in my home state. I was born into a family that had more than, I mean, two parents, an incredible extended family. Like I had so much support and love, and um, I had so many great things happen prior to getting into the NFL. And so my transition to Detroit, the word I use a lot is naive. Like I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. Um, People say, you know, professional sports, it's a business. What does that mean? Like there's no playbook for having your friends in the locker room one day and then the next day they're cut, right? There's no playbook for throwing a couple interceptions and then, by virtue of roster spots, your poor performance leads to somebody else losing their job, right? There's no playbook for showing up in a city where nobody knows you, but they have this idea of who you are, who you're supposed to be, and they have expectations of what they want you to do. And if you don't live up to that, then you know the what's the word I'm looking for? Hatred is too strong, but the ire that comes from that, it's look, it's very much a two-sided thing, right?
Mhm.
What I have I'm extremely lucky to have been in the position that I was. Worked really hard to get there, and the experiences that I had in the NFL are things that I don't necessarily wish on a lot of people. Like it's some tough stuff, to get home from Chicago after having a pretty crummy game and having somebody leave death threats on your voicemail about how they're going to come and murder you in your sleep. Like those things, like it's just not real life, right? It's this like I said earlier, it's this fictionalized place that exists somewhere in your television um that most people don't have the perspective to handle it in a healthy way until you're sitting on the stage of a variety show with another professional athlete. It's like, what the hell are we doing? Like, how did we get here?
Well, and that's what I enjoy about being around you is you have great perspective, and I think you realize, and very few professional athletes and ex-professional athletes, I think, have the understanding or the perspective that this was just a chapter, right? This is a chapter in my life. It doesn't define who I am or what I am, but it was important, right? It defined parts of me, and I think we as a society decide to just, sometimes crucify some athletes for performances or, you know, put these athletes, in a godlike position. And it's like, honestly, like, it's a job that is just have so much, there's just like a big, mirror window, right? And you're always kind of being judged. And the reality is, you're trying to
I'm going to
have a
jump in here
living
real
just
quick.
like
I'm going to
everybody
I'm
else.
going to ask you. Nat, I'm going to ask you here. When did you understand that concept? That this is not who you are, but rather it's a chapter in it's not who you are, it's what you do at the moment. Did you understand that when you were playing?
It's a good question. I'm not sure because you get so involved in the day to day, into the world of the club or the brand that you play for, and you kind of can't. It's hard to step out. My off seasons, I was always able to step out and kind of see it for what it was. But when I was in it, it just felt like the whole world was watching, right? And of course, you know,
Mhm.
soccer in the United States when I was playing wasn't as big as the NFL, the stage you played on, but it still felt like it was intense. It was all about results and things like that. And I
For
always
sure.
wanted to have the mentality of like there's the next step, right? There's something I'm going to be doing after soccer, right? I'm gonna whatever it is that kind of kept me a little bit more grounded about who I was and trying not to, define what I did. And I think it was when I played professionally in Norway that really got a perspective on like, okay, like I'm looking at my United States over there and seeing it differently. And I'm getting,
Mhm.
nobody's even talking about me over there. Like I'm just like, I'm almost forgotten. And it's like the feeling of like, oh wow, like you know, this is something that, not everybody's paying attention to that I'm not, that, exciting. It was humbling. And I think it was great
Mhm.
for perspective, right?
Here's the thing that looking back on I struggled with. Um, you know, for as mediocre, subpar, whatever as my NFL career was. At one point in my life, I was one of the 32 best people in the world at what I did, right? So, in order to get to that point, the level of focus, the level of commitment, the level of nothing else in my life matters because I am solely focused on this one goal, right? So, in order to get to that point, you have to truly you have to live it. It has to be your being. It has to be everything that you do. You have to go to sleep thinking about it. You have to wake up ready to jump back in. And if that's how you approach things, it's tough not to have that become who you are. Right? That was the tough part.
Mm.
And as I started to realize that, um, it's interesting that I think so. My first 4 years in Detroit, I was drafted to be the savior of that franchise. It obviously didn't work. So if I'm drafted to be the savior, and I believe that I'm the savior because that is everything that is who I am, that is what I do, that is why I'm on this earth, and then it didn't work, it's going to mess with you, right? So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what you were talking about. Like, this isn't who I am, this is just a part of what I do. The interesting thing that happened is once I came to that realization, the importance of the job took a back seat. And once the importance of the job takes a back seat is the moment you see your way out the door, right? Because there are so many people in this world who are ready to put in the time and make it their priority and make it all that they are and make it their being to come in and try and take one of those 32 jobs that you have.
Mhm.
It's this really like, so as when you go into it to try and get that job, it's not healthy. It's not a healthy way to live. But you accomplished it, right? I accomplished something that I was working extremely hard for. And then once I came to the realization that, this might not be everything that's out there, that's the moment that it's like, well, see you. We don't want you anymore because your focus isn't solely on this job. And it's this really interesting, like, how do you still accomplish something incredible yet keep everything in perspective at the same time? And I think it's really difficult to do that. For me, it was pretty idyllic, to be honest. I mean, I grew up in Lowhurst, which now is a pretty affluent area. But my dad was a high school teacher, and my mom, was she was a self-employed architect. She did some work on the kind of worked part time, um, and it was an area where there were families, kids. I remember counting, there were like 92 kids in a 5 block stretch. Like that was childhood. It was like, hey, let's go to All Saints and shoot hoops. Let's go to Lowers Park and play tennis. Let's go to the Devil's Dip and ride bikes. Like it was just kids were everywhere. And it was a livable, affordable, it was accessible, um, and I understand that that wasn't necessarily the experience for everybody, but I would say for the majority of people who lived in Portland, that was kind of how we felt. And I remember when I came back from being in Detroit, and the first house on my parents' street, like a block or two down, was listed for $1 million. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like this, Portland has, and I'm jumping to it, but I mean, from there, it was, the renovation of the Pearl District, which, used to be all like Meyer and Frank warehouses growing up. And then it was the restaurants that were coming in. And Portland, like people really kind of discovered all the great things that we all knew about Portland. Um, and yeah, I think with that discovery of how great it was, um, comes the challenge of trying to figure out the problems that naturally come with it. But at its core, it's still the same place that I know, or that I knew growing up. I always knew that I would come back to Portland, and this is where I stayed in the off season. But it's interesting um, how different things were when I got back. Right, we bought a condo downtown to, because I could lock it and leave it. And God, I mean, living in the Pearl District for, from 2004 to 2007, like it was something that never existed for us as a city growing up. That's for sure. But it was fun to see. It was fun to see the evolution of the city, and it was fun to see that revitalization. It was fun to see that northwest area turned from, like I said, I remember the Myron. It was the Henry Weinhardt's brewery and like the Myron Frank warehouse. Like that. That's it. Like that. Like down in that section, and now all of a sudden you're converting all these old buildings to condos, and you're putting up new buildings. It was a incredible place to live for me in the off season. It was fun to see it grow.
What did you like when you think about Oregon? Like, I think about, I guess, my perspective where I grew up. I grew up in a small town called Pueblo, Colorado, a blue collar town. It was a town that I love fiercely, and I have a lot of good relationships, but I wanted to get out. Like that was like my goal was to get out. I didn't come from a bigger city like Denver, or even Colorado Springs, which was north of us. So like, what about Portland, that made you want to come back? Was it family? Was it the lifestyle? Like what about it made you know that, hey, I'm gonna come back here?
You know, Initially it was family. Right. I was one of 16 cousins. My dad was the oldest of 8 growing up. We've got a lot of family, and a lot of and frankly, I had a lot of good friends in the neighborhood that are still in the neighborhood. But the more I got to see, the more I got around, um, you go to all these other cities, and there are nice things, but I always left feeling, oh, that was great, but, or that was nice. However, like in Portland, you're an hour from the coast, you're an hour from the mountain, you are a half hour from the Columbia Gorge, world class wineries, breweries, restaurants, whitewater rafting, fly fishing. Like this is 2.5 hours from the high desert. Like there's just so much great stuff in the Portland area that as I got older, I realized how lucky we were to have all that growing up.
What do you make of downtown, like post COVID now? Has, obviously we're getting a lot of national news, right? And not a
Mhm.
lot of it is great. How do you kind of, perceive downtown as somebody who understands Portland little bit better than most?
Whew. Um,
It's a big question.
it is, and there's a lot of different. God, there's a lot of different perspectives to incorporate into this. My wife. Um, I'm going to brag on her a little bit. My wife was the first female president of the board of the Blanchet House downtown,
Okay.
and opened up the state's first free all nurse led healthcare clinic in the state to serve the population, the residents at Blanchet downtown. So we have a really interesting, and her more specifically, a very hands on um, experience with the house's population down there. Right. Portland is in a really interesting place. And I think it actually kind of goes back to what we talked about, or the adjective that I used a moment ago, and Portland's kindness and their empathy. It's an interesting, whereas a lot of cities would just say, screw it, clean it up, whitewash it, plow it all. We're getting back to what we used to be. There's a humanity that exists in all of this, and I think people in Portland are more likely or more willing to think about that, right? To think about the yes, do we want downtown to be clean? Do we want downtown to be thriving? Do we want downtown to be a place for everybody to go and share an experience? Absolutely, we do. But I think, like we talked about a second ago, there's a kindness and an empathy that is inherent to people in Portland, and finding a way to do that in a compassionate, figuring out how to do that in a compassionate way is really difficult. And I think the frustrating part for everybody, and myself included, is that by trying to incorporate everybody into this, it feels like nothing happens,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
By and if nothing is happening, then what we continue to live with is the status quo, which, you know for a whole host of reasons, you know COVID, a national pandemic, really a failed rollout of a decriminalization of of drugs, we a changing business climate, like all of these things have kind of put us into this place that, downtown is different than what we remembered, and it's different than what we want it to be. And I wish I had an answer, to be perfectly honest. I wish I did, because, um, like I said a moment ago, like Portland, when I came back after being gone, after being in Eugene, after being in Detroit, I loved coming back. I loved coming home. I loved, like you said, leaving Providence Park and walking down and finding a pub to go to, or getting something to eat, or walking all the way down to the Pearl District and stopping by Powell's. Like, those are things that people want to do, and I'm not sure that everybody feels comfortable with it right now.
I want to shift a little bit over to your nonprofit. Like I've been a part of a few of the events. I really enjoyed it. Like, how has that kind of shaped you post career?
It's funny. So I started my foundation when I was actually drafted back in 2002. So it's been 23 years now. But we didn't really take shape until after I retired. I mean, again, like we talked about earlier, I was lucky to grow up in an environment where I understood how supported I was, and that I understood that it was my hard work that got me there. There were a lot of doors that were open for me along the way. And so I knew that at some point I wanted to do something philanthropic when I was done. I didn't know what that looked like. But the story I like to tell is I walked into a, a bank president's office after I retired, and I was like, all right, let's go, let's do this foundation. And he had been really supportive um, of our fundraising efforts when I was playing. And at the time, we just kind of gave small grants to organizations that applied. And he said, Joey, I love that you're passionate about this. I love that this is something that's local and close to you. But if you're telling me that the money I give you, you're just going to turn around and give to Boys and Girls Club, like, why wouldn't I just give it to Boys and Girls Club in the first place?
Mhm.
I was like, damn it. I don't know.
Got me.
I'll call you in 6 months. Yeah, you got me. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and I was like, all right, if you're going to think of the Harrington Family Foundation, what are you going to think of? You're going to think of, hopefully, you're going to think of me. Um, I'm somebody who's from Oregon. I left, I came back, I played quarterback. And quarterback is a position of leadership. And so I came up with this idea of finding the next generation of leaders in our state. And I called it the Community Quarterback Scholarship. So what we do is we give five $25,000 scholarships, college scholarships, to graduating high school seniors from around the state. And our criteria has nothing to do with grades or test scores. It's financial need and community leadership. What have you done to invest in the place where you live? How have you identified a problem and tried to solve it? And one of the things that I realized that I could provide for these students is access, right? So I help open doors. We say, all right, great. Anybody can, cut a check and say it's been fun. But what we're trying to do is build a network. We're trying to build a community of people who love this state, who have invested in this state from a young age, and may go off somewhere else and learn some new skills, but always know that this is where their roots are, right? So if I can help provide education and access for young people who care, what it's going to do is it's going to breed this community of people who want to take care of home, right? Who want to make their home better, who want to make it better for not just their themselves, but for everybody around us. So my goal with the foundation, we give, like I said, 5 scholarships a year. We have 52 graduates from around the state that are now starting to
Wow.
get entrenched in their jobs, right? I got a call from one of our students a couple weeks ago, and he just, hey, Joe, he graduated from law school back on the East Coast, and just wanted to let me know that he got a position on the Senate Finance Committee with Senator Wyden. And I was like, man, that is absolutely fantastic. And I said, that's great for right now. When are you moving back? He's like, how did you know I was going to come? I was like, buddy, you, from the moment I read your application, I knew you wanted to help out here in the state, right? So learn what you can there, and then come back and what are you going to do? Run for Congress? He's like, yeah, I'm going to start with the state representative. He's like, that's incredible, right? Take your experience, come back and apply it to here. And then when we call and we have another student like you, come have coffee, share your experience, be the door that um, help open the door for somebody who was like you 10 years ago. So that's kind of the crux of our program, and why I love it so much is it's personal, right? This is home. These are students just like me 25 years ago who love the place in which they grew up and want to figure out a way to make it better. You don't have to be you don't have to be an NFL quarterback. You don't have to be the governor. You don't have to be you know, some face on TV every day to make an impact. You don't have to be some celebrity to care about where you're from. Like, all these people will make an impact in a different way, and they all still care about where from where they came. And that's I think what motivates me the most, is knowing that our our network is full of people who want to continue making this place a great place to live.
Awesome. Well, I know you have places to be and things to do. I have so many more questions, but I want to save those for time. I really appreciate you taking the time, Joey. It is always a pleasure to hear, how thoughtful you are and your perspective, and what you're doing now. I think you're doing some really great things for Oregon and continuing to invest in the state. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, buddy. Always good to talk to you.